What's up, and welcome to Clarity for Parents of Athletes, bringing you stories from professional athletes about their parents and how they were raised. My name is Gabe from aclearmind.com. All right, and welcome to episode number 12. I hope you are enjoying all the episodes, either the ones with the athletes that I interview or the ones that with myself and the lessons that I delved into in many different aspects. So this one, again, is going to be just with me and delves into something that's been kind of hitting me pretty hard as far as just appearing in my life and things I've heard from people and read online. But before I get to that, I want to thank you for listening to all the episodes so far. And as always, encourage you to review, rate, and subscribe to the episodes and share them with others as well. Parents, coaches, even non-parents. This stuff is so beneficial just from a life perspective, let alone an athletic perspective and raising an athlete. I also want to invite you to connect with me either through my website, aclearmind.com, or you can go to speakpipe.com. It's SPEAK, like you're speaking, and pipe like you smoke out of, speakpipe.com/clarity4. And what you can do is you can leave me a voicemail about anything that you're going through and I can help you out with. If it's something that you don't mind me sharing, your little soundbite, please let me know that. Or if you want to keep it private, just let me know that as well and I'll respond to you. But again, if you were willing and open to sharing, it could really benefit some other people who are in the community who are listening to the podcast and who may be going through the exact same thing or something similar to you in their life, and it could definitely help them out. So again, you can go to my website, aclearmind.com, or you can go to speakpipe.com/clarity4 to leave me a voicemail. So today's episode is on resiliency. This started with an email I got from a listener who really has been loving the podcast and the interviews with the athletes. And his big thing was, hey, all these people have gone through resiliency in their lives in order to make it to where they were. And if you listen to the episodes, everybody goes through something. And this is really goes for everybody in life. Everybody goes through some sort of resiliency. Now, the thing with these athletes is that they are obviously in a profession that if you can handle resiliency, you're going to succeed. If you can't handle resiliency very well, you're not going to succeed at the level that you are capable of. So we have to look back to what were these resilient moments in their life where they were able to bounce back from some kind of setback. Now, you can take the episode with Jay Demerit. Jay went to England with just, I think, $1,000, something like that. Ended up sleeping on the floor of his friend's mom's house in an attic and ate beans and toast for many months. And heard a lot of no's trying to make it to the professional level in England. And, he was able to go through a lot of resiliency. He bounced back quite a bit. And they all have stories. Injuries. You heard Ashley McIver Demerit, multiple injuries with knees and shoulders in her skiing career. Andrea Neal had a horrific motorcycle accident. If you haven't heard that podcast episode, you got to go listen to it. She almost lost her leg and was able to bounce back. So anytime people go through something, they have a choice to make and either be driven from it or basically be defeated from whatever they're experiencing. So before we kind of go in a little bit further, I want to give the definition of what resiliency is. And I got this online. And so resiliency is defined able to withstand or recover quickly from difficult conditions. And they're synonyms: Strong, tough, hardy, quick to recover, quick to bounce back, buoyant, difficult to keep down, irrepressible, adaptable, flexible. So, yeah, all those things go hand in hand to success, whether it's athletic success or it is success off the field as well. The more resilient we are, the more we can push past whatever we're experiencing in a positive manner, then obviously that leads to more success. Not everybody has that. And some people have it at a certain level, but I feel like professional athletes really have to push through a lot in order to be successful, especially the people that I've interviewed so far. They've pushed through a lot in their lives in order to get to where they were, and they were all very high-level functioning athletes in their respective profession. So now that we have a definition of what resiliency is, we can look at how we make children not resilient in their lives, or how people become not resilient. At least this is going to be a theory, a non-scientific theory. I haven't done any kind of research on this, but I dug into my intuition, and that's really taken me into very many positive avenues in my life, so I'm going to go with it. So listen with an open mind. I believe that anytime people struggle with resiliency, they are viewing life more from the outside in. Now, what I mean by that, if you heard the first episode, I talked about my philosophy that I do and that I follow as a transformative coach. And a big one is when we follow life from the outside in. It's this illusion. And what I mean by that is anything that's outside of us, other people, other things, accomplishments, material objects, all those things from outside sources. If we have the illusion that those things make us happy or make us sad or make us feel complete, we're living in a world of illusion. Because the reality is life and happiness comes from the inside out. It's always our thoughts about those things, about other people and other things, other material objects. It's always our thoughts about those things that create our reality. It's not those things itself. You know, you can take a shiny new car, right? Physically, one car, let's say it's a blue car. That shiny new car is the neutral object, right? It's a material object. The way I look at it could be completely different than how somebody else looks at it, right? If I own the car, it could look different to me than it does to somebody who doesn't own the car or has an even better car in their mind, right? So the car is the car. It's the material object, something outside of me, of other people. And again, the way I look at it differs from the way somebody else looks at it. The way I look at it today could differ from how I look at it in 20 years if it's still around in my life, right? The car hasn't changed as far as being a car. It may lose its paint job over time or its luster, or its physical luster, but my thoughts about it can change over time. Does it make sense? So that's why I believe that our world is really created from the inside out. It's our thoughts, which come from inside of us. That's what creates our reality. It's not the thing itself. The thing can help create thought within us, but it's not the thing itself. It's the same thing with other people. Same thing with coaches, right? If a coach is yelling at your child, it's going to affect you differently compared to how your child feels. It may be more intense for you compared to what your child feels. It could be different than what the other parents on your team feel. It could be different than what your child's coach is feeling, right? It could be different than what the other team's parents are thinking. Who knows? Everybody has their own experience. The coach yelling at your child is something completely up to the individual's experiences. Everybody has their own experience going on, which is based on thought, right? The coach yelling is really a neutral thing. Our thoughts about it create either a positive spin or a negative spin on everything that we're experiencing. That's why I believe, and many people believe, at least that follow my philosophy, that our experience is created from the inside out, not the outside in. So when we start to believe that our happiness only comes from an outside source, whether it's another person or another thing, or an experience or some kind of accomplishment, anytime we start to believe those things, we leave ourselves more susceptible to not being resilient. When we start to shift and really believe that life and happiness and all those things, all those accomplishments, all those things are great, but our true drive comes from the inside. When we start to believe and understand that our power lies inside of us, that's when we remain resilient. Right? I believe we are taught to not be resilient. It's because we start to believe life from the outside in. I mean, you've seen children, you've seen sick babies, sick children, injured children. They bounce back so quickly because they don't know any better. That's our internal mechanism. That's our pure love for life that we don't even know how we're operating. That's just how we're naturally born to be. But then we start having these illusions of we'll only be successful if this happens, or if that person loves me, or if that coach gives me this much playing time, or if I get this college scholarship, or if my children are this successful, then I'll be happy. That's completely false. That's an illusion. We may start to believe it because when that kind of stuff starts to happen, then we slowly start giving away our power. And when we give away our power is when we start losing our resiliency, or it's harder to bounce back. Now, in my opinion, another huge influence on keeping children resilient are their parents, and especially how they respond to some kind of adversity. Now, there are some people who really, how do I say it in a nice way, respond to adversity in an emotionally intense manner, and others not so much. So, I want to give you an example of my childhood and kind of my first memory of really seeing how my dad responded to some kind of adversity. He and I were living in the Middle East and in a country that was known to be a little volatile. Let's put it lightly. I was 9 years old, and a civil coup broke out one day, and we were stuck in the country for about a week. And during this time, we could hear gunshots, bombs. We were in an apartment complex, and my dad worked for the United Nations. So it was a United Nations apartment complex. And across the street was another building, and there was somebody from the other side. I don't know if it was the quote-unquote rebels or the empire, whichever one. I guess it always depends on how you look. But anyway, so essentially one part of the coup was trying to attack the other part of the coup across the street from us. And there was one night where it was extremely intense. Gunfire was going on. Everyone from the apartment complex had to go into the bottom floor, which was typically where the cars were kept. It was kind of a garage, kind of storage type area. I don't remember there being any cars in there. But I remember we all had to go down there, and the attack from this side was getting extremely intense. You could just hear things blowing up, gunfire. Everyone was downstairs, and then we heard a knock at the door of the apartment building, and my dad answered it along with a couple other fathers. There was all UN families, and they opened the door, and it was a guy with a machine gun, and I couldn't tell what was going on. I was just looking. I was kind of in the garage area. Just remember seeing my dad extremely calm. The guy turned around and he left, and my dad came in, and I said, what was that all about? And he said, he asked if he and his team of guys could come in and shoot across to the building across the street from us, from inside of our building. And we just told him no. And I remember thinking, like, wow, my dad responded in such a relaxed and cool way and got his point across. Now, imagine if he responded differently and started freaking out and getting really emotionally intense about it. That's probably the programming I would have received, is when the going gets tough, you flip out. But for me, I really think that was the beginning to program me to deal with adversity in a very calm way. And that's typically how I handled things as far as my coaching and the rest of my life. Whenever there was some kind of adversity, you just handle it and you just do it. That was always my response. And that's what professional athletes do so well. There's so many times where there's adversity in matches, right? In any type of game, you're going to face some kind of adversity, especially if you keep playing year after year. You're going to have a lot of experience dealing with it, and you just deal with the adversity when it comes up. What can typically happen is some kind of adversity happens, and then a person gets in this cycle of thought, right? Of what could be, what could go wrong, what happened. If you think about it on the soccer field, if you lose the ball and the other team scores a goal, right, and that mistake was on you, how do you handle it? How do you respond? Do you just shrivel up the rest of the game, or do you respond positively? If you lose the ball, can you transition from offense to defense immediately with absolutely zero thought? Those are the best players can do that, right? It's all about the reaction from going from offense to defense when you make a mistake. So that is built into children from a young age. And parents, they serve as a huge role model on how to deal with adversity and how to be resilient because of it. So think about it next time you're dealing with a situation. Are you responding with an emotional level of intensity? Are you complaining more so? Because the children pick up on that kind of stuff, right? If you're overly complaining about things, and of course we have to vent every once in a while, but we have to be careful and aware of the fact that our children are going to pick up on what we're doing. So they start to respond whenever some kind of incident happens. Boom, they will respond the only way that they know, right? And what they know typically comes from the parents and how they have responded to other situations. So you got to be aware. That's my advice to you. Be aware of how you respond to situations, especially ones that are full of quote-unquote adversity, because your children will respond exactly that same way. So another little bit of advice on how to keep resiliency going. So another thing we tend to do as parents is we tend to affect resiliency basically by how we're communicating with our children. And the idea behind resiliency is, I hear this a lot from parents, and I've thought of myself. We want our children to be tough, right? Because tough is good, right? To have thick skin, not let anything get us down. So we teach our kids, some of us, right, to be tough and to push past everything. We tend to invalidate our children by saying, hey, suck it up, deal with it, that's life, things like that. Right? We think we're helping, right? We want them to be tough and just say, okay, yeah, that's life, accept it and move on and push through it. Prove everyone wrong. Right? How many times have you heard that? Or have you even said that? I know I've said that. But what that does is that invalidates what your child is thinking and feeling. And when they feel invalidated, I talked about this in episode, I think number 5. Yeah, episode number 5. When children and people feel invalidated, they start searching for outside sources, things outside of them, to give them that sense of completeness, of love, of happiness. They start searching for things in accomplishments, which accomplishments are great. It's great to have good grades. It feels great to win. All right, so I'm not denying that stuff isn't cool. I love it. I love winning. But I'm also okay if I don't win. I know it doesn't define me if I lose a soccer game or if I don't accomplish a task. That's being resilient, right? Because I know my happiness strives from inside of me. It doesn't come from anywhere outside of me. Material objects are great. Accomplishments are great. People are great. Love people. Love all those things. But they don't make me whole. They don't make you whole. They don't make your child whole. But when your child starts to believe that kind of stuff makes them whole, then they start searching for those things. And when they don't get those things, then it just adds to the stress, to the suffering that they're feeling, because they're giving away their power. You want your child to maintain their power. When we invalidate their feelings, Again, they start searching for something outside of them to make them feel valid in their lives. Go back to listen to podcast episode number 5, just so you know a little bit more about what I'm talking about and other possible invalidating statements. I give a whole list on invalidating statements, some that you may not realize that you're doing or you think you're helping, right? We may think we're helping when we say suck it up or deal with it or that's life or push through, be tough, get up, don't feel pain, push through the pain. That kind of stuff's invalidating. So yeah, I encourage you to go back and listen to episode number 5. So obviously, if we're invalidating, then in order to keep your children or your child feeling like he or she is a resilient creature and is able to bounce back, we have to validate. So how do we do that? So obviously, it's easy answers to say, well, don't invalidate, okay? Now, life is full of opportunities to give lessons to our children. That's what we do as parents. We help guide them, right? So there's going to be these opportunities to want to make them more resilient. But really what you need to do is keep them from being not resilient. Because again, they're born with, again, this is my non-scientific belief, they're born with resiliency. But we keep them living from the inside out, they will stay resilient. And a big, crucial key is to validate them. So let's take an example that I mentioned a little while ago about a coach yelling at your child, right? Now, a big key to before you start jumping into a lesson is you have to start with validation. That's my recommendation. You don't have to. You can, obviously, it's your choice, but you know what I mean. A crucial component to teaching a lesson is to validate, especially when it's a difficult lesson, right? So let's say the coach is yelling at the child, right? And the child feels that the coach is against them, the coach hates them. Now, what do? So big, crucial key component to it, of course, you have to validate them. What I mean by that is let them know you know how they feel and do that before you start delving into the lesson, right? And I find it's best to really get specific if possible. You have to really tune in to what is my child feeling right now before you say suck it up, right? Actually, that's probably not a good thing to say at all. So anyway, we're tuned into what our child is feeling right now. So here's a little example, something where the child is feeling the coach is against them. You can say something like, look, I know you feel the coach is against you, right? You feel like, this is what I mean by get specific, okay? That's general. Look, I know you know I know you feel like the coach is against you. And here's the specific part. You feel like you can't do anything right, or the coach is picking on you and not everybody else. And if you can add it to yourself too, all right, I'm sorry, I'm taking a break. I'm speaking to you, the parent. So if you can really connect with something that you've experienced in your life, that's really golden, right? So you can say something like, I'm going back to speaking to your child now. So you feel like you can't do anything right, or the coach is picking on you. And I know I felt that way when I played soccer, or when I played basketball, or when I played football. I had a coach like that. And I know how that feels. Yeah, you don't feel good inside. Now, pause real quick from our conversation. I was a coach, or I'm a coach, soccer coach, so I can really connect with this as well. All right, as far as trying to validate this way. So let me unpause. I coach players who felt that way also. The parents always told me that. They felt that I was picking on them, or the parents thought I was picking on them. But what I was trying to do was to bring out the best, and sometimes the best, you need to be more demanding of players. So I know it feels like sometimes the coaches are picking on you, and I get it. But maybe the coach is trying to be more demanding of you because they see something inside of you. Now, once we do that, then you can go into the lesson and say something like, look, you're going to find people like that in your life, whether it's a coach, a teacher, a boss in the future, but you really have two choices how to respond. Do you want to give them control of how you're feeling? Or do you want to try and push through it? Listen to what they're saying behind all the emotion, right? Not listen to how they're saying it, but what's your coach telling you? It's choice is up to you. So that gives them the power, right? So it's a lot longer than saying, hey, just suck it up, All right, that's how a coach is. That's the easy way. Now, the thing about consciousness is it really involves a lot of patience and understanding, right? But if you can really tune in to how you feel your child is feeling, that can go so far in life. And I'll tell you something, as I also besides what I do with this podcast and my coaching, I also have a business, and we employ a lot of younger people, millennial types, I think borderline on the Generation Z as well. And one of my partner in the business, he went to a leadership conference and came back he went to a seminar up there about how to basically as a boss, work with people, the millennials, and also this Generation Z, the next step after, or the next generation after millennials. And one thing that they said that really stuck with me, that he told me, was they really want to know how they're doing and really want to feel basically a sense of validation, right? And this is the big shift that's happening in this country that I've seen, and I imagine all over the world as well. Maybe not some places, or it's happening a little bit faster where there's a little bit more freedom, like the United States. But a shift is starting to happen. And what the shift is, it's coming from a place of where, there's been so much drive from a place of ego in the past. And that's where people responded, like with, hey, suck it up, deal with it, life's tough. People responded that way. I'm not saying it was the most functional way, but people did respond that way. Now it's becoming a lot different. These younger generations, and even people my age, I'm a Generation Xer, but people in those generations, they started to feel like, hey, something's not right with this drive ego side. So we wanted to know why as well, right? Why is the coach yelling at me? What do I need to do? And it led from there to be like, hey, we need a little bit more validation in our lives, right? And what that really is starting to shift more into a balance of yin and yang. And I talked about it a couple episodes ago, about the one with injuries. It was episode number 9. There's starting to become an overall shift of the yin and yang. For so long, men especially were driven with such a yang side, the masculine side, and not enough of the yin side, the feminine side. And vice versa. Women were coming from more of a place of the nurturing and quiet, a feminine side. That was what was more socially acceptable. But now things are starting to shift. The women are starting to become more balanced with their yang side, and a lot of men are starting to shift and become more balanced with their yin side. When you are balanced as a whole and you have both these masculine and feminine traits that are consuming you instead of being predominantly one side or the other, you can achieve so much more success. And obviously, so can your child. Again, those days are starting to go away. The suck it up, right? A lot of coaches still operate that way, and you can hear them on the sidelines. You can see them. Even at high levels, that's starting to shift. Coaches are starting to connect. The best coaches out there, in my opinion, are the ones that truly connect with their players. That's what I try to do when I coach a team. I had a very high-level youth team, and I was good at X's and O's and tactics and teaching technique, which are big parts of any sport. But what I really tried to do was really come from a place of love with my players. And I still have that. These guys are off into adulthood now, the last club team that I coached. But I really connected with them. And that stuff still exists now. I still have a deep love for the team that I coached, and really any team that I coached after that or even before that. It's all about connection, right? And obviously that's going to go very far with your connection with your athlete as well. And that connection really can be enhanced with making sure that they are feeling validated. When they feel validated, they understand that you're coming from a place of love. And the more love that they feel, and the less they feel attacked from a place of your ego, And again, sometimes we slip, right? Sometimes we snap and we just say things out of instinct, out of anger and frustration. But the more we can become conscious of like, why is that coming up? Why did I react that way? And going and apologizing to your child and then explaining in a more slow manner, right? And even validating, look, I'm sorry. I know I said some things that weren't very nice, right? And I really got frustrated. I kept asking you to, this is my son here. I think this happened today. Look, I kept asking you to go put on your clothes for the day and you weren't doing it. You're just ignoring me. And, I kind of got really frustrated. Look, I'm sorry. I should have been more patient, but also if I keep asking you to do something, then please just go do it. Okay, can you do that? So again, that's validating their feelings, right? My son didn't like that I kind of raised my voice a little bit. So I validated that feeling, but also gave him that lesson. Like, hey, if I ask you 10 times, please do it by the 10th time. Don't make me get to 11. Something like that. I didn't say those specific words, but I think you catch my drift, right? That is what keeps children resilient. Now, another thing that keeps children resilient, and this is so huge from a young age, is they have to know mistakes are okay. If children grow up feeling that mistakes are not okay, they will struggle in life. They will always be seeking out ways to make parents happy. And this starts from a young age, super young age. Children are going to make mistakes. They're going to break things. They're going to say things that aren't very nice. But if we punish them at a more, severe level than it needs to be, and whatever that level is obviously up to the individual, but your child will always tell you how much is too much, right? If you're listening to them, you got to feel them out. My son definitely does that for me, right? But if children grow up feeling like mistakes are not okay, they will be afraid to try things. And that is really the key of resiliency. It's making mistakes and going past them. So I'll give you an example of something my son used to do. We used to do timeout for him when he was young. And my son, so let me back up. So we try not to do any plastic in our family, like drink out of plastic. We don't have plastic Tupperware. We try and use a lot of glass and metal to store our food, just so we're not bleaching chemicals into the food that we're trying to store. So the same thing goes with what we drink. We typically drink out of glasses. And so, this with a 2-year-old, it doesn't quite work very well. He did have sippy cups, but we would also put sorry, I'm just thinking about this story. But we would put glass on our dinner table. And so we were doing timeouts, and my son, we're all sitting at the dinner table. My son, he was, I think, about 2 years old. He grabbed a glass, threw it on the floor as hard as he can. He looked at me and he said, "Timeout." So I said, all right. Now, I had a choice of how to respond. I could yell, get mad, put him in timeout, or I could do the thing that takes a little bit longer and takes a little more consciousness and awareness and be a little more patient and say something like, hey, I see you really wanted to throw that on the ground. You know what? And that's just not okay. We can't do that kind of thing, right? We don't throw this stuff on the ground, okay? And my son, I say he was almost 2 years old, so that may be a little in depth for a lot of 2-year-olds. My son was extremely verbal at that time, so he could speak to me. And when he did speak to me and asked for timeout, that was actually, we stopped doing timeout after that. It was like, all right, he's just pushing limits here, so it's up to us how to respond, right? And actually, that kind of worked, that response. He stopped responding in that kind of way, and I think that may have been the last glass that he broke as well. So another thing that he did, my son doesn't like to sleep in very much, so my mom was here visiting, and she stays in our house when she visits. The night before, I told my son, it's like, look, it's Saturday. We can sleep in. So please just let us sleep. Let mommy and I just want to sleep in a little bit. And he always starts off in his room and then comes into our bed in the middle of the night. So again, sorry, I'm thinking ahead to the story. So my son, and if you remember my story I just said a little bit ago, sometimes I have to tell my son and prompt my son to get ready in the morning, go change his clothes, and I have to tell him several times. So he was letting us sleep in just slightly, but I was awoken to my son hitting me and going, "Ah, hey." And I looked up, and my first instinct was to be like, dude, we're supposed to sleep in. But he's staring at me. He had put his clothes on, and he was brushing his teeth. So he just wanted to show me, like, hey, look, I'm getting ready all by myself. Now, what would have happened? I decided not to say anything. So I was just like, hey, good. I'm glad you're brushing your teeth. Now go wake up Vavá. That's what we call my mom. It's Brazilian for grandmother. So I said, go ahead and hang out with Vavá. And so he went, and of course, now that I was up, I couldn't sleep in anymore, but that's okay. But now my big point is, if I would have yelled at him and said, dude, you're supposed to let us sleep in, how would that have affected him? He would have thought, well, hey, I'm doing what you asked me to do, and now you don't want me to do it, and you're getting angry at me. And I made this mistake, and then you can start to see how the ball rolls at an unconscious level, okay? Children aren't capable of that kind of conscious thought. A lot of adults aren't either. It just goes into their unconscious. It'll go into something like, oh, I made a mistake, and I'm not good enough. And the more that kind of stuff happens, the more that parents say those kind of things, and the more children start to believe they're not good enough, then they start to live life with that kind of lens. I am not good enough. And let me tell you something. If children, and you may experience that yourself as an adult, right? Or maybe you did as a child. If you start to see life in that lens of you're not good enough, it can be really difficult to be resilient. Right? And that's really, that feeling and sense of I'm not good enough can happen in anybody at any age. And they can carry that on with themselves for a long, long time and be afraid to try new things. So luckily, I kind of bit my tongue with my son in that moment, and I praised him like, hey, thanks for getting yourself dressed. Now, remember, next time, really try and be quiet by letting us sleep in. So my son thought he was letting us sleep in. He didn't say anything except for, hey, so I could see him brushing his teeth. And he's super cute. So it's like, sometimes it's just hard to be mad at him for very long. But that's kind of stuff's what I'm talking about. Children need to be comfortable making mistakes. Now, Gucci and Yewu said it, and it's really stuck with me. Gucci and Yewu was the last interview that I did with an athlete. He was on the U.S. men's national soccer team for 10 years, played in countless clubs in Europe. So he was talking about Cristiano Ronaldo and the fact, and Lionel Messi, and for him himself also. He said, those people, including himself, including Gooch, they made their uncomfortable comfortable. Now, a lot of times, and you may have experienced this yourself, we try to do something, and as soon as it makes us uncomfortable, we stop. Whether it's a matter of safety or a matter of just being afraid to try something professionally or socially, we just don't do it. And I experienced this with my life. I decided at one point is I'm going to do as much as I can to do things that are uncomfortable. And that really led to a lot of success in my life. Because if you can push past that feeling of being uncomfortable emotionally, not so much physically. Sometimes you do have to push past yourself physically, obviously, as an athlete as well. But there's always that threshold even as an athlete, because how much is like, all right, I'm pushing myself physically, but boom, you can get injured as well, right? So we don't want to get to that point, but we do need to push ourselves physically as an athlete. But we do the same thing as humans overall. Is the more that you can push to that part of yourself as being uncomfortable and push past that to where it is comfortable, right? Then you start to see things in a different light, right? Everything else is a lot easier if you're like, hey, that used to make me feel uncomfortable, but now I'm here, right? That leads to success. And in order for children to do that, they have to know mistakes are okay. You have to know mistakes are okay too. That's where it all starts. You're not supposed to be perfect. Nobody is. We have this illusion that everyone's supposed to be perfect, or that at least we're supposed to be perfect, even when we see other people are not perfect. And there's been studies out there that people view other people who are not perfect, they view them more favorably. So that's a sign. It's actually good to be imperfect. Again, in order to get to that point as a child, they have to know mistakes are okay. And you are that first layer of them knowing that mistakes are okay. If we're too harsh with them in our vocabulary when they make mistakes, they will grow up with this hesitation and this feeling that mistakes are not okay. And that's another thing that Gooch mentioned in that last episode, episode number 9. That's what helps you grow. Mistakes help you grow. That kind of stuff leads to resiliency. The way you speak to your child leads to keeping them resilient or pushes them past this point of being not resilient. So again, just like the choice is up to the child, if they want to push themselves or not, the choice is up to you as well. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was helpful for you. Again, I really urge you to share not just this episode, but all the podcast in general, because I feel like it's so beneficial for children, for parents, of course, and for people who don't even have children or not even in sports. This kind of stuff in these interviews are just like so many golden nuggets out there about how to come from a place of love. And when we come from a place of love in life, we're so powerful, because it's always the answer. It's coming from love, operating from love. Everybody has their responsibility in it. That takes patience, but you got it. I got it. We all got it. All right. So again, thanks for listening. Please share, please rate, please review the podcast, tell others about it. Please subscribe on iTunes, on Google Podcast, on YouTube. We're always available. You can go to my website at clearmind.com to see a list of all the podcasts, and find us on Apple Podcasts and Google Play or Google Podcasts as well. So again, feel free to connect with me on speakpipe.com/clarity4, or go to my website at clearmind.com/podcast. And I look forward to hearing from you. Again, I hope this was helpful. Much love to you and many blessings.